And our time, 12:06 here on the Talk to Me Network, home of the Helping Seniors of Brevard program. And that music indicates it's time to introduce the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard and the host of our show every Wednesdays at 12 noon, Carrie Fink. Good afternoon, Carrie.
Good afternoon, John Harper, and thank you. And thank you for joining us for the lunchtime edition.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we were joking in here because I know you had kind of like a late arrival coming into the studio. We said, these broadcast divas, they show up and everything's all set. We're kidding. John is like the hardest working guy in the radio business. And I was telling the guys in the studio, John, that you have been working together with our president and founder, Joe Steckler, going literally all the way back to when he was getting Brevard Alzheimer's going. And then on top of that, you were the guy that got Joe into broadcast himself when he was wanting to get education out that he thought would be valuable for seniors and their families back in his Brevard Alzheimer's days. And then, as you know, collectively, we've been at Helping Seniors now into our 13th year of service. So this has been going on for quite a while, John.
So it's been a good run. And, yeah, Joe and I go way back to, I think, right around 1992.
Wow.
That sounds so old, doesn't it?
That is like the previous century.
Wow.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, before we date ourselves any further, we'll jump right into the radio show. Right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF. We gather around the radio every Wednesday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Thank you for making your lunchtime hour with us. And also, welcome to those listening online at WEJF.net. And those who are also catching this as a podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple iTunes or Spotify or any great service like that, you'll find Helping Seniors Radio there, because our mission as a Florida nonprofit, 100% local to Brevard County, is to inform, educate, and connect seniors and their families to resources and information that's going to make a difference. Joe calls it making your aging plan. We euphemistically call it getting your ducks in a row. And there's a couple of things that we've learned along the way. I said the number one thing is don't try this on your own. People love to self-help, and there's a lot of value to self-help. But if you've ever gone into a search about something you don't know about on the internet, you can get in deep water real quick. And one of the problems is then you don't know if you're getting accurate information or if it's what somebody thought was accurate information or what somebody was hoping you might take as accurate information. So there's lots of dangers out there. And then even as we talked about this, don't try it on your own thing. We hear all the time. We were just in a session with one of the area's top elder law attorneys. Her name is Amy Van Fossen with the law office of Amy B. Van Fossen. And she tells stories when you sit down and talk to her for a minute. She'll tell you stories about somebody who went to a really reputable family attorney who tried to put documents together. But then when the rubber needed to hit the road, one sentence cost like tens of thousands of dollars difference because that attorney didn't have that background, didn't know that specific niche. And so you got to find the right people to help you. The other thing that we talk about, and I think it's going to be really appropriate for our show today, we were talking about this at an event on Monday. We said this is probably going to be our theme for the next year, since we seem to be about barnyard animals. We've talked about get your ducks in a row. Now we're going to talk about next year, don't be an ostrich, which means let's get ahead of some of the things that we know might come into play. Because it's much easier to solve things, figure out things when you have a lot of options. You can choose at your leisure. You can say, I'm going to think about this for a week, and it's no pressure. And so often, because now for 13 years we've operated the County Senior Information Helpline, that free call at 321-473-7770. And we took 5,450 calls or something like that last year from seniors and their families. And let's be honest, a lot of those people we're kind of like in a bind and trying to figure out something that needed to happen pretty much right away. And at that point, while there might be options, they become limited, and then, quite frankly, they become pretty expensive. So today we're going to kind of look at a couple of different things that I think you're going to find our show really helpful to you on. First of all, I want to introduce a good friend to the Helping Seniors radio program, somebody who's really volunteered a lot of his time and helped us a lot with a program that we're doing here in Palm Bay. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's called the 55 Plus Renters of Palm Bay Workshop. We've been doing these monthly for a couple of months and really making an impact for seniors and their families trying to learn how to do it. His name is Frank Scaglione. How are you today? He's an attorney, by the way, and he's volunteering through the Florida Eviction Prevention Project, kind of the auspices of all that, but you're actually a very successful attorney in your own right with all the work you do with your quote day job when you're not kind enough to come and help us. Frank, welcome to the radio show. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
And also in the studio with us, let me introduce our other dear friend from the Helping Senior side of things. Her name is Teri Brant, and this is exciting to me because this is the first time that Teri's been able to be on the radio with us, and we get to talk about something that people don't know about. But they really need to know and understand, and that's a continuing care retirement community. We are flush with ALFs, which is what they call assisted living facilities and different senior living options in Brevard County. I think, Teri, welcome to the show, by the way. You're with Buena Vida Estates, and I love every time we tag you, it's like the best, what does it say?
The best kept secret in Brevard County.
Yeah, and we're going to share this secret today on the radio. But I read a stat, there was like 140 or something different assisted livings in Brevard County. Now, we think of big building assisted livings, but there's a lot of like group homes and things like that.
Right.
But I heard it it's like 140. Does that sound like it could be possible?
I don't know that number, but I know there's a lot of private home assisted living, and then you have your corporations. You do have some nonprofits. So yeah. I don't know what that number is, honestly.
But yet, out of all the ones we're going to talk about, you guys are exclusive in Brevard County with continuing care retirement. And you're going to understand why that is such a peace of mind kind of way to think about your retirement and your retirement living. We're going to get to that in a minute. I want to come back, though, if it's okay with you guys. We're going to start and talk about the series of seminars we've been doing together with the city of Palm Bay. And they have identified a challenge within the borders of Palm Bay, but I would say it's really, if it's not countywide, it's probably even statewide, Frank, that seniors in particular are finding themselves to be displaced in the rental marketplace because they simply can no longer afford to rent. And really, I would almost argue through no fault of their own. They're not like being, quote, deadbeat renters. They've lived in this place for all these years. You've seen it because now you've been leading some of these sessions. It's an interesting dynamic, I think.
Yeah, I agree. One of the problems that seniors have is they'll have a steady source of income like Social Security, but it's not a very large source of income. So a lot of times a landlord would love to have a renter like that because you know they're getting a check every month.
Right.
As opposed to someone who's working age, they might lose their job, fall on hard times. However, I think one of the problems we have today is the market is so saturated with renters. The market is so saturated with renters that prices are going up much faster than a Social Security check. So what ends up happening is the pressure is on landlords to raise the rent, and the seniors can't meet that demand the same way that working age people. If like Vinny says at our seminars, the younger guys can always get a second job. But right. A lot of times people on Social Security can't do that.
Yeah, literally before coming to the radio today, I was on site. Nancy Deerdorf, our operations director, is on site right now at the Mega Senior Expo, going on right now at the Melbourne Auditorium until 1 p.m. And I was talking with Lois Thomas, who is with Career Source Brevard, and she does a thing called AARP Back to Work 50 Plus, and this literally because the answer is when we're challenged with rising times, kind of like what we're talking about. Vinnie Richardson, who is the director of Christian Housing Ministry, she's a HUD certified counselor, one of only 3,500 in the country. I'm sorry. And so her expertise and her passion is helping seniors to not get displaced in this. So, if you're a younger person and you're trying to counsel them on how you solve your problem of your finances for, where you want to live, you would say, well, you take a second job. So there's a certain number of seniors who might say, that's going to be what I can do. But there's also a big number who can't. And when you're on a fixed income, that's what really makes this so problematic, because not only are they relying on the fact, hey, I've paid this much rent for this many years, Then all of a sudden, maybe the property gets sold. People pay, it's time for the owner to cash out because look how much the property's appreciated. But now the new owner maybe is not trying to be evil. They're just trying to make the numbers work based on what they paid for the property. But now it's a whole different world.
Exactly. And for the landlords also, prices are going up dramatically as well.
Yeah.
When my wife and I bought our house here in Satellite Beach, mortgage rates were in the 3s.
Yeah.
And now people are getting 7, 8, 9% mortgage rates.
Yeah.
So the landlords themselves have a lot of extra expenses that, ultimately have to come out of the renter's pocket. And if the renter's incomes can't match the increases in the landlord's expenses, then the renter is the one that's going to end up unfortunately having the problem.
Yeah, and it's not only that; it's also the fact that we have the insurance going up, the taxes going up. As a homeowner, I say, well, I love the fact that they tell me this house is worth this much money. That makes me feel really good until I get the tax bill, until I get the insurance bill. And then it's like, oh wow, what's going on here? But the trickle down effect is to the seniors who are stuck on fixed incomes. And one of the things I think is so valuable about this program, again, it's called the 55 Plus Renters Workshop of Palm Bay. It is an initiative of the city of Palm Bay using actually federal funds, the CDBG, which stands for, let me see if I can get this right, Community Block Development Grant Program. I could have it twisted. I don't know. I'm not good.
Sounds right to me.
We live in the Space Coast, so we should know our acronyms. NASA loves acronyms, right? But so anyway, this is done with the idea of educating so that you know your rights as a renter. And Frank, I've watched you go through this process where you're educating us about it. And to me, it's fascinating because I've learned some. I've seen you do this actually several times, but each time I walk away with another piece of the puzzle. And they say information is knowledge and power. And that's really, I think, what happens when you share this because people have this like, well, it's me and against this big corporation that owns all these units, and I don't really know what my rights are, and I don't even know what I can tell the representative of the company when I'm in line, when I'm out of line, all those kind of things,
I agree. Knowing your rights is really the most important and first step. I've learned through this process a lot, actually, and I'm an attorney. I've been a landlord myself several times, and I'm still learning new things. So I think that's something that's really important for everyone is to understand what their rights are, because like I often say at these workshops, you got to pay a rent. Eventually it just comes down to you have to pay your rent. However, there is a process, and it's not like in the movies where the landlord can just throw you out on your ear the same day because you didn't pay your rent. Eventually, you're going to have to come up with that money, but there is a process designed to make it fair to everyone. But the process only works for you if you know what the rules are.
Yeah, that's the thing I think that really makes the most difference when people come to this. And let me tell you, so the next one is actually happening this Saturday. Sadly, you are not going to be able to lead this one, but you are going to lead the one, I think, in December and in January, because we're doing these. There's 3 more opportunities for you to get into this. And it's a Saturday morning. We call it Breakfast with an Attorney. So not only if you're qualified because you're a senior renter in Palm Bay, age 55 plus, not only do we buy your breakfast, but you also get to have this opportunity to hear the attorney. And, you call any attorney, they tell you, oh, it's like $400 an hour. And you get 2 hours. And you're going to walk away with information that's really valuable. And I love particularly, Frank, when you do these because you're very kind with your time to allow for questions. So people say, well, this is what's going on. Is this right? And then just the way you navigate them through, like, yes, they can do this, but this is probably where you have an opportunity to kind of clap back a little bit and say, well, no, not here. But if you don't know that, and somebody who doesn't know the laws and understand the process, you're kind of like out there on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you're interested in getting more information, you can give us a call at 321-473-7770. I'll give you a minute to grab a pencil so you can jot that number down. 321 212-473-7770. And if you're calling today, you're going to reach Karen Warnland in our office, and she will take down the information and get you signed up. So we do this. It's actually a pleasant experience because the breakfast is actually quite good at Meemaw's Barbecue right here in Palm Bay. So that's where we gather Saturday morning, 9 to 11. Space is limited, so you do have to RSVP. We can't just necessarily figure it out at the last minute. We need your help to call 321-473-7770. And I encourage you, even if you might be okay right now, to give a call, because what we've also discovered is a lot of people thought they were okay until they got a renewal, Frank. And then all of a sudden it's like, now what do I do?
Yes, and that's one thing that we're seeing a lot of problems with is because the rents are increasing so quickly. It's not that the renters aren't paying their rent, or that they're even being evicted for not paying the rent. It's that the lease is not being renewed because the landlord is looking for renters that can pay a higher rent. And in those cases, you still have notice requirements and rules that are designed to protect both parties, but the renter in particular, because a lot of times it can take a lot more than a week to find a place. So one of the things that's really important to look for in a rental lease is the notice requirement if the lease is not going to be renewed. Because the process for removing a renter for a non-renewal of a lease is essentially the same as an eviction. However, the notice requirements could be significantly different. There are requirements that are set forth in statute based on the frequency of when you pay your rent. So for most people, 30 days would probably be the most familiar notice period if the landlord wants to not renew the lease for whatever reason. Maybe they're selling the house, maybe they want new renters, for any number of reasons. However, if you have a lease, a written lease, then whatever is in that document is what's going to control, not what's in the statutes. So it's the most important thing is to read your lease.
I was thinking about that as you were explaining that point. This is something that, people, I think it's almost like the shock value of what happens when these people call us to say, I've been here 20 years, and all of a sudden this is what's happening. And so again, like we were talking about at the opening of the show, we said, you've got to look ahead down the road, because I guess one of the problems with rent in general is there's always going to be an around the next bend, whatever that means. The price is going to go up, or the ownership's going to change, and the nice people you dealt with are no longer there. You're dealing with somebody who has a whole different way of approaching things. And then it really does come down to the black and white of what's in that agreement, right? Because the other point that I wanted to ask you about to kind of comment in on was that I think so often we don't understand like that whole process. We don't even understand the language that's in our lease. And I think that's one of the things you get out of this kind of a session, where you kind of get educated. And when you think about it, isn't your housing cost for most of us like the single biggest amount that we spend in our monthly budget? So it makes sense to invest some time and understand where you sit, so you could maybe head off a problem at the pass, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as, like you were saying, a lot of times people don't understand the language in the lease. When you're signing a lease, even if you're signing a lease with a big corporation, that's still a negotiation between each party. So if you don't understand a clause in the lease, you can ask to have it rewritten in a way that you do understand. Now, whether or not the landlord is going to agree to that is a totally different story. But you're not required to just sign whatever's put in front of you.
Right.
I understand that a lot of times the people that would be most affected by an adverse housing event probably don't have the leverage to make significant changes to their lease. But if nothing else, it's a conversation that you can have with the landlord, so that you at least understand what you're signing.
I was thinking about that because usually, you're a trained attorney and you've got years of experience behind you on all sides of this, so you know what you're doing. But most of us, we walk in to a lease office and they throw the piece of paper. You know how it is. It's usually like in triplicate, and there's like little fine print on, the front part. This is how much you're supposed to pay. This is when it's due. And that's usually all we pay attention to. Mm-hmm. But if you flip it over, there's like this thing you have to break out like a telescope to be able to read the language that's on the back. And then you're like, oh, I guess it's okay. And you just sign it and you move on. And then you don't realize there could be like an atomic bomb in there waiting for you,
That is true, and like with a lot of things we were talking about, that little fine print, it's less harmful to the young people than it is to the
that's
the older population. That's a good point. That are signing those leases. But that's another area where understanding the law is very helpful, because even though in general, the lease is what is the lease is the first and last word in the relationship between the renter and the landlord. There are things that you just can't make someone contract.
Yeah. No, it's good. This is a conversation we're having with attorney Frank Scaglione, who's been helping us volunteering on the Florida Eviction Prevention Project in our 50-plus Renters of Palm Bay program. We're going to take our mid-show break and come back on the second half and spend some time with Teri Brant talking about continuing retirement care communities and why you need to know about this. See you on the other side.
And a string of pearls, Glenn Miller and his orchestra, kind of the music of our life, not your life, but our life these days. And Carrie Fink, always good to hear that, and always good to get back to the second part of our show. Good conversation, and let's look forward to what's coming up next.
Yeah, thank you, John Harper. Yeah, we're always joking about what a great theme song, because everybody just loves to bounce along with that. It's so good. So welcome back to the second half of the Helping Seniors radio show on 90.3 FM, WEJF, where we gather around the radio lunchtimes every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m., right here. And welcome if you're listening online, WEJF.net, and those of you who are continuing along with us on the podcast. If you were here for the first part, we're having a great conversation with attorney Frank Scaglione, who is been kindly volunteering. He's like a big-time corporate lawyer with a big company that's actually, your company is actually based in San Antonio. Am I saying that right?
Well, my office is in San Antonio, but the firm is actually based out of Detroit.
Okay. Yeah. But you're so kind to take time to volunteer and help us in the work of helping seniors, because we're doing this project called the 55 Plus Renters of Palm Bay Workshop. And actually, it connects in through the Florida Bar Association with a project that they created called the Florida Eviction Prevention Project. So Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., right here in Palm Bay, we're going to get together at Meemaw's Barbecue for the November edition of the 55 Plus Renters Workshop. And the whole key is to help you understand what your rights are as a renter, so that you don't necessarily get tossed around by the waves of whatever's going with rent and lease renewals and things like that. At least you can build up a strategy. And I think that's why that is so important. So thank you, Frank, for volunteering your time to help us in all this. The next session, like I said, is this Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. How do you get involved? It's free of charge. Because it's presented by the City of Palm Bay through funds available through the federal CDBG program. And so you just got to call 321-473-7770, 321-473-7770, and Karen will help you get coordinated and organized for that Saturday morning. We call it Breakfast with an Attorney. Frank, just real quick, and then we're gonna move along and talk a little bit with Teri. But I just want to say, like, the number one thing that you have maybe found to be interesting in your experience, because you're the one kind of like sharing the information with folks, and you see how it's making a difference for them, because they're getting, like, their eyes are opened up, like, hey, I do have some rights here.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most interesting thing for me has been to see how things that I guess as an attorney, I've sort of take for granted that, everybody would know, that people unfortunately don't know.
Yeah.
And like it's, for example, just the pre-eviction notice.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't understand that when you miss a rental payment on day one, that doesn't mean you can be the locks can be changed on you on day two.
Right.
A lot of people think that that's the sort of thing that can happen, like what we call self-help, where the landlord can just change the locks and put all your stuff out on the curb, and that's just absolutely not true. So being able to help people understand how the process works and how there's a lot that goes in to that between that missing a rental payment and your stuff being on the curb that people just don't normally understand.
Yeah, and not only that, you got into a whole lot of nuances that I was surprising. Like you cover, what happens if there's not a lease. It's just been a verbal agreement because the nice little lady has rented you her place for all these years, but now she's maybe in an assisted living herself and things are changing. Son is in charge, and you're just dealing with all these shifting things, and it's good to know where you stand. So one more time, 321-473-7770. Just tell them you heard us talking about the Renters Workshop here in Palm Bay, and they'll get you connected from there. So I wanted, we're all about education and information, and Joe Steckler, our president and founder, has always talked about making an aging plan, and that's why I love what we're going to talk about really next, because Teri Brant with Buena Vida Estates is, I don't know that we barely understand what an assisted living is. Like if we're maybe the adult kids of aging parents and we haven't really ever paid attention to this, I have this feeling that we typically just lump everything and call it an old folks home, and we don't even know what we're talking about. So when we start to talk about, as you get a little bit more into it, you understand there's skilled nursing facilities, there's assisted living, there's memory care, there's independent living, and all those things. And yet there's something very special about what you guys do. And let me see if I get this right. It's called Continuing Care Retirement Community. Did I say that right?
You did, and we shorten it to a CCRC.
Okay. See, because we're dealing with acronyms. We live on the Space Coast. We love acronyms. But talk about what that actually means, because we said that there could be, I heard a number. I don't know if it's accurate, so don't quote me on it, but I heard like more than 140 different varieties of retirement homes, communities, assisted livings in our area, just in Brevard County alone. And yet you guys are literally the only say the acronym again.
CCRC, Continuing Care Retirement Community. I think, to your point, Carrie, I think that I'm of an age where I have placed my parents in a senior living community, but when we get a phone call, and when I was looking, it was all assisted living, right? I need assisted living. And we'll have calls in that need assisted living. That's not the term anymore. The term is senior living or retirement community when you're looking for independent. Assisted means you need care. Something to do with your daily living activities, whether that's showering, medication, that kind of thing. So when you're looking, we get a lot of calls, oh, well, I'm independent. I live by myself. That's great. That's what Buena Vida is all about. You come in as an independent resident. What you're going to find with a continuing care retirement community is that there is a contract. That contract ensures that you have the peace of mind and security that you're going to be able to live the rest of your life out at this community. Now, we have people that call in and say, well, I don't want to buy in. Are you one of those that you have to buy in? There is an entry fee at most, if not all, continuing care communities, and that's your entry fee underwrites long-term care. So you're looking ahead when you're looking at these CCRCs. You're looking ahead and saying, okay, what do you have? Well, a CCRC has a true continuum of care, which means you come in as an independent resident. We have assisted, memory, and skilled nursing homes in our community. So that means that you or your children or your loved ones are never going to have to look for another location for you if you need it for medical, We have every level. So when you're looking at a continuing care retirement community, and sometimes now they're called a life plan community or life care community, means that for the rest of your life you will be taken care of regardless of what happens financially or medically.
Wow.
So you don't have to be a millionaire, and a continuing care retirement community does not take all your money. But I will tell you that we have a lot of singles that never dreamed they could afford to come to a continuing care retirement community. And when they look at the numbers, they realize that they choose the lifestyle that they want. Do you want a studio apartment up to a 2-bedroom apartment, or are you looking for a cottage? You're really independent and you're not ready for an apartment with hallways. You want a cottage. So you're looking for those. You're going to pay a different rate for each one of those. And you pay an entry fee that underwrites long-term care so that when you need those levels of care, your rate is going to be much lower. And when I say that, it can be 75% lower than if you are going directly into an assisted living community or a memory care community.
Wow.
That's huge. So when you're looking at the numbers and you say, oh, I have a home and this is what my assets are, I'm going to take the equity, some of the equity based on that entry fee from my home. And I'm going to pay that entry fee. And now I know what my monthly rent's going to be while I'm an independent. Now, if I need assisted living down the road, that independent rate is going to go away. And now I'm going to pay a set fee, which in our community, 70% of our residents now pay less when they go to assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing than they paid when they were in independent.
Wow.
So that contract really ensures that you are going to be taken care of for the rest of your life. In a rental community, you don't have that assurance. You pay a rental fee, you pay that for as long as you're there, and then when you need care, they may or may not have a place for you, and you don't know what you're going to pay.
Wow. You know, we spent the first part of the show talking with attorney Frank Scaglione about the problem that renters face at a certain point in time. And I guess part of the conversation that we got into, particularly in the mid-show break, is I guess this can affect, if all you have is a rental agreement with your assisted living, you're still subject to a lot of the same stuff that we were talking about could happen to any renter. And what a difference it would make is if you knew going in that you had thought this thing through, because as you know, statistics suggest that we're going to live a lot longer maybe than even we think we are. And so a real true fear is like, well, what happens if I run out of money and I can't pay my rent even at an assisted living facility? And what you're talking about is a way that kind of sets you up in a way that even as your care needs might change, you're still going to be able to have peace of mind knowing that you've addressed all this up front, which is kind of getting your ducks in a row kind of thing.
Absolutely. And not everyone wants to pay that entry fee. But what I can tell you is that when I was in rental communities that do not have an entry fee and that are not a continuing care retirement community, I would sit with a mom, I would sit with her son, and he'd say, what happens if mom runs out of money?
Right.
And at that point, truthfully, what they would hear is that if mom runs out of money, mom's going to have to find somewhere else. The reality is if you're in a community that may not have memory care and now mom needs memory care, she's not going to be the one choosing where she's going. The family is, or the best friend, or someone. So the reality is that when you're looking ahead and you're planning for this, we encourage you to look at other communities. Buena Vida is not for everyone, but the advantage is that when you're looking, you have the ability to choose where you're going to spend your senior years.
Yeah, you know, that's something that I've heard a lot of people talk about, is that you want to be sure. Joe Steckler, our president and founder, he's always talked about something he calls elements of care. And he says you should be careful in your aging plan to not pay for things you don't need too early. So his argument is like, when it comes to like, if your plan is like, I want to age in place at my home, he says, you take a company like, you know, for example, like a Jennifer Barton with Seniors Helping Seniors, where they come in and do companion care. So you can get just a little bit of help that you need at the point. There's a point where you might need more care. That's the time to bring in like a heavier duty what you need because you may need some, some additional care with showering or things like that. And then so as you move through those things, you're expending your resources based on what the circumstances are going to require. And so one of the problems that you're pointing out that happens to a lot of people is even if they think like, well, I went to this assisted living, that's going to be fine. But the question is, if you outlive your money or you're getting so far down the road, what's your plan at that point? And think about it, at that point, you're probably in the least optimal position to try to figure out your options. So it seems to me like spinning that whole thing backwards, having that conversation with you and say, like, let me educate myself about what a continuing care retirement community actually could mean. It seems like you're getting a tremendous amount of peace of mind because your roadmap is laid out and whatever life is throwing at you, there's already a way to address that.
There are. And so many people, if like what you just mentioned with Joe saying don't spend your money ahead of time, they would criticize a CCRC for taking that entry fee at the start. Mm-hmm. But what you have to look at is it's an insurance policy. Many people have a long-term care policy from years ago. If you're looking now, you're going to pay a whole lot of money for not a lot of insurance care. Right. They have really cut back. They figured out that they were giving a whole lot more before than they really needed to or could afford to. It's limited time as far as what they're going to pay. And a long-term care policy will give you a check, but they're not going to say, here's the community, we have a place for you, you're going to love it. They just give you a check. So now the person is having to look for somewhere. And I think it's planning ahead.
Yes.
It's getting your ducks in a row.
Absolutely.
Looking ahead and saying, this is not nearly the cost of a long-term care policy that a lot of folks have paid years and years and years on, and those rates continually go up. This is a one-time fee that's going to ensure that when you need the long-term care, your rate is going to be lower. There is going to be a place right there for you. It's wonderful with spouses because the spouse is still on the campus and you're not having to drive or find somewhere. But it's wonderful for singles because they know that my family doesn't have to worry about me. Right. They know I'm taken care of. Fun story real quick.
Yeah.
We had a a prospect come in. She had taken care of her mother for years. And she said, oh, well, my daughter said she's going to take care of me. My daughter-in-law is a nurse. So I don't know if this is a good fit for me. I'm probably going to go live with them. They came back a week later after talking to their family, and she said, my daughters were like, thanks, Mom. I don't want to have to take care of you that way, but I can come visit you, I can stay with you, and I know you're going to be taken care of.
Yeah, and let's talk about this because I didn't really realize until we were talking the other day that you have been the community has been in existence for decades. I think you said
41 years we celebrated this year.
Wow. So this wasn't like this just rolled off the truck yesterday. You know, they're building a lot of places, but it still leads me to wonder the same question, like what's the long-term plan? Mm-hmm. You know, if somebody thinks they might be planning, I'm going to live into my 90s, but nowadays it's not unusual to live into your hundreds, right? And
we have many residents.
You need that. And what you guys do, it's a beautiful campus, first of all. We haven't even talked about just how you guys are set up and what a great community it is. How, I know nothing beats like, come out and take a tour and let me show you what this is. But how do you describe it if somebody's calling in from out of town and they say, yeah, Mom's down there in Florida. What are you guys,
We call it home.
Love it.
There are apartments, like I said, from studio up to a 2-bedroom with a den that are beautiful. And 2 years ago, we opened the cottages at Buena Vida, which is a gated community. It is off campus. It's right across the street, but it is behind Cheddar's. This is a gated community of cottages with their own clubhouse, pool, pickleball, bocce. I mean, it is a lifestyle. At Buena Vida and most continuing care retirement communities, you need to be 65 to come in with Medicare. Mm-hmm. So that resident, if we see them going into a cottage because maybe they're 67 or 70 years old, they're active, they're still playing pickleball, and now all of a sudden they want to be under one roof. So they can move over across the street to Buena Vida. They take precedence. Our residents always take precedence if they want something different. And now they want to be in a 2-bedroom condo apartment feel, and everything is right there. They don't have to leave the community for dining, for activities, for aqua aerobics, for anything they want to do is right under that roof.
Wow. Wow.
And then we have the assisted living there. We have memory care. Jasmine House is what we call it for dignity. And then we have skilled nursing on the campus as well.
Yeah, so the point is you're really equipped to help anybody at whatever stage of care that's necessary. And I have heard that advice before, is that you want to be careful that as you make those moves that you're making the right move, and that you're careful that it's going to meet your needs, even for things that you might not even foresee that you need at this moment. How does the process, who ought to give you a call? What is the person that you would say, like, this is a person that probably ought to at least make sure they're considering what a CCRC could mean for them?
You know, anybody that is thinking about senior living. I talked to a gentleman yesterday. He was 62 years old. He's not ready for senior living, but they're looking, and they're from, they're not in this area. They're in Kentucky, but they were looking to plan ahead.
That's
I would
smart.
tell you that anywhere from 65 to 75, you should probably know where you want to go, what your thoughts are, what your plan is. And it's interesting. I moved my parents into a community that was not a CCRC. They have the funds to pay for anything that they're going to need in the future. But someone like myself and my husband, we're not going to have a pension. We have a home, we have assets, and we have Social Security.
Right.
I can tell you that we will end up in a CCRC because I know that you can choose what you're comfortable with living and financially. And then as long as you you know that you're going to be protected there.
Yeah.
And my children are not going to have to take care of me. The generation is still there that says, I got to save all my money for my kids. I can tell you that I don't think our generation, and I'm 63, I don't think our generation is thinking, I got to save my money for my kids.
Right.
What we've seen in this generation before us is that we could live to be 100 years old.
Right.
And do we have the funds to pay for ourselves so that our children don't have to?
Yeah.
So I would tell you, anybody that is looking at senior living, compare what's out there.
Yeah.
Know what's out there. It's a true education.
So how does somebody, what is the process? They pick up the phone and say, hey, I'd like to take a tour. I'd like to see what I heard you guys talking about CCRC. I'd like to learn more. What would be the next step?
Well, Debbie and I are in the office. Debbie's been there 20 years. You talk about people that have not had longevity. Buena Vida with 41 years. We have several people that have been over 20 and lots more that are over 10. And I will tell you that we're always happy to have somebody come in and show them our building. It does not look like a building that's been there 41 years.
No, it does not.
We are a nonprofit. And
Yeah.
we are a standalone, which means we are the only Buena Vida Estates. Wow. So our monies stay in the community, very different than a corporation.
Yeah.
So we are able to update continually, but I will tell you that the design is done every 6 to 7 years. Expansions and upgrades are always being done. But to come to just take a tour, just to see and sit with Debbie or myself and sit down and say, okay, this is what we do to show you the area. We also do a lunch and learn, and we'd love to have you come in. It's a wonderful tour. It's a wonderful presentation and a yummy lunch. And we have usually about 20 people in that group, so it's not overwhelming, but you get to see the whole community.
Good. So is there a number that they would reach you at?
Absolutely. It's 321-724-0060. And that takes you right to Rosario, our concierge, and she will have you talk to Debbie or Terry.
Say that number one more time.
321-724-0060.
Yeah, talking with Teri Brant with Buena Vida Estates. And, you know, you guys are kind to host us in our senior education seminar. And it really is a gorgeous facility. So you owe it to yourself right there, US 192. You're kind of like in the heart of right, close to the mall, close to everything. It's a great location for you guys to be at. So again, we're talking about Buena Vida Estates. Teri Brant, the phone number one more time.
321-724-0060.
And you guys have a great Facebook page. I've seen it. The website is great. So it's a great thing that you need to invest some time and learn about. So we want to thank both you, Teri, and also
Thanks.
Frank Scaglione
Thank you.
for helping us. You guys are really the engines behind keeping the things that we do with helping seniors, because we have no other reason to exist than to try to do the right thing and educate seniors and keep them moving in the right direction. And there's a million things that happen along the way, so we're just trying to help you get ahead of that whole curve. So with that, we've kind of wrapped up our time on this week's edition of Helping Seniors Radio. We'll be right back here next week. See you then.